Thanks, Rajan, for the kind words. I'm Mudit Jain. I'm Managing Director with Synergy Life Science, which is a medical device-focused venture fund. As you will see, we do have a very distinguished and diverse, really within a group of two, a lot of diverse experiences here, representing corporate venture, operator roles, and entrepreneurs working across traditional medical devices as we know it, and also across consumer medical devices. And in interest of time, this is a half an hour we have here, so I would actually ask Kadir and Anupam to my extreme left to just quickly go through your backgrounds and tell about yourselves.
Maybe I'll go first. So my name is Kadir, Kadhiresan. I'm with the J&J Corporate Venture Capital Group, JJDC. So we are co-located with the J&J Innovation Centers. There is one here in Menlo Park, one in Boston, one in London, and one in Shanghai. Our goal is strategic investments. So in all areas J&J operates in, which is medical devices, pharmaceuticals, and consumer. So any equity investments done within J&J goes through JJDC. We work with our operating partners to identify targets, and our size of investments range from anywhere from a few $100,000 to multi-million dollars because we do pipes as well. So that is, and you can go to jjdcdevelopmentcorp.com or J&J Innovation to be able to access us to submit your ideas.
And Kadir, if I can just ask you, give a little bit more about yourself itself, what your experience has been and your background.
I came through the medical device field. I started out as an R&D engineer. So I have electrical engineering background, designing pacemakers and ICDs and CRT heart failure devices, and then moved over to the business side of things after I went back to business school. So I can appreciate the entrepreneur view of being able to develop what it takes to develop a technology. So as part of the investments, when we get ACT on the board, to be able to really counsel the CEO and the management team to see what are the challenges they're going to face and how we can be able to overcome that.
Thank you. Anupam?
Yeah, my name's Anupam, and I can basically speak to coming out of academia and bringing a technology out, doing a startup. I probably sat on the other side of the table for most of you guys, but past couple of years, actually since 2010, I've been basically working on a startup called Lift Labs. So we were developing a new assistive device for people with neurodegenerative disorders, so that included people with Parkinson's and essential tremor, and brought that onto the market, and then last year was acquired into Google Life Sciences. And so that's where I've been as a team and technical lead.
Thank you. And I apologize, I forgot to mention, but Brad from Medtronic could not join us because of some personal health reasons. But Kadir, again, you touched a little bit about what JJDC does and what the innovation centers are. So what are the kinds of opportunities in medical devices that are of interest to JJDC and Innovation Center, and how do you guys work together from JJDC perspective and Innovation Center perspective?
So all of equity investments go through JJDC. But equity is just one tool among many to be able to interact with entrepreneurs. If there are some earlier stage opportunities, maybe proof of concept, so the idea on a napkin type of opportunities, that is something that are specific people within the innovation centers that you can work with to be able to either assess the ideas. Maybe you just file for a patent. You are trying to kind of get some funding to be able to say, well, as proof of principle. You might be able to kind of contact the innovation center and maybe work out a research agreement that may not involve equity. Maybe it's a convertible debt. So it could be a very small amount that kind of goes to proof of principle, upon which there could be maybe a substantial, extensive collaboration set up. Okay. So that could be done. From a JJDC point of view, we look at every opportunity from medical devices. For example, obviously J&J is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, ranging from sutures to orthopedic implants to ablation catheters for treating AF. So all of those, I'm not going to take time to kind of repeat all of them. You can go look it up on the web to be able to see where J&J operates. But there are always kind of key areas where external innovation is typically focused on. It doesn't come in, the hip implant. There is, some innovation, but there is not a whole lot going on there. But if you look at, our Clarent business, which is kind of ENT, which is a company based in the Bay Area here, looking at chronic sinoplasty, mostly trying to adapt technologies from one area to the other. For example, in cardiology, where the innovation is much more, a little bit more further out, coming into ENT. That is one area of innovation that is kind of expanding. And then in AF ablation, that's another area. There are a lot of companies in the Bay Area as well, and Southern California, which is investing in areas to how to treat AF. And that is a rapidly growing disease. I mean, if you are 65 and older, there is more than 5% chance that you have atrial fibrillation. And the drugs don't do a very good job of treating it, so you need a device intervention for it, and one of J&J's divisions operate in AF treatment. So there are certain blocks of areas that we can look at. But if one of you have an idea and then you want to know, well, J&J is so big, I don't know whom to go to.
Exactly.
You could come to us, and we'll be able to kind of route it through the right person to evaluate the idea and see what the next steps would be.
And does the stage of development of that technology matter to you folks?
It used to, but the last few years we have, and it's with concurrent with the establishment of these innovation centers, we have gone much earlier than before. In fact, JGDC established a seed fund 2 years ago. So especially in the pharma, I think we have done a lot more earlier stage investments, but in medical devices, it is just beginning. So that we can say we are agnostic to it, to the stage of investment.
Okay, so somebody can really come to you with an idea on a paper napkin.
Yes, but one thing I got to specify is we are a strategic investor. We want to see a line of sight to an operating company.
Sure.
So if, although there are specific white space areas that we have kind of declared, for example, in our global surgery unit, we would say, anything with metabolic surgery, cardiovascular surgery, anything to do with lung interventions, early detection of lung cancer and interventions, those are all fair game for that, even though we are not in those businesses right now.
Sure. So, Anupam, tell us a little bit about Lift Labs and Google X. You mentioned that you kind of grew up in the academia. So how did you weave your way through from academia into Google's hand, and what that journey has been like?
Yeah, sure. I basically was a PhD student and was working on some really basic technology that is very general. And when I graduated, I had some friends that actually were working on some other startup companies out of their research projects, and they kind of told me about how they secured some funding. And so we were talking about idea on paper napkins. So what they did was they actually secured government funding, and you have to be a little bit further along than just a paper napkin usually. I mean, it's all about probability of funding. You get a better probability of funding if you have some more initial results, some more feasibility studies that you've done. I basically applied for a small business grant. So this is from the Small Business Administration. The agency that we got it from was the National Institutes of Health. And this is non-dilutive funding. So basically, it's almost, for me, I really treated it as a gift. This was something that, this agency really believed that, this device should be out there for people to use, and they wanted to back the building of it. And so for the first year, it was really kind of, it wasn't much funding. It was just enough for about a year. And they wanted to see some results after that. So, I kind of did the typical thing where I quit my job and then worked out of a little garage type place for a year, and then applied for the next round of funding, which they have a second phase. And that one was for a lot more. That was enough to actually, hire people and really build the product out. So after 3 years, this was from 2010 to maybe 2013, mid-2013, we actually had a product, built. Then it was, how do we manufacture this? And that's when we went to some private investors, and we did a small raise, and then quickly put it out on the market. I think, as a small company, especially with the medical device, it's really challenging, given FDA regulation and everything. So we had to navigate that in terms of what class could we market this at initially. How do we get to the market quickly? Because we don't, as a small company, you don't even know if people would buy it. So there was a whole kind of you have to get it out into the market. You have to get the feedback. It's really critical. So that's what we did to launch, and it was kind of a serendipitous thing. Like we weren't really planning to get acquired, but it was a right fit for us, and it happened to be a right fit for the team that we joined. Kind of right place and time.
So tell a little bit more about Google X.
Yeah.
Because again, in the medical device world, to be honest, that's a new player. At least we haven't done any work with Google X, and Kadir, I don't know if you folks have. J&J has done some things. Yeah. But what is Google X Life Sciences specifically, and how does it relate to medical devices?
Yeah, I mean, Google X in general, we probably all know about the self-driving cars and the balloons and all these different projects. So there's really the big thing is, having these new technologies that would be, maybe 5-10 years before they actually end up being used as, in society. But it's something that would be around for at least, a generation or 2 or 3.
So every medical device fits that category. It'll be 5 to 7 to 10 years away from being first used.
Yeah.
And will have some impact on, some critical impact.
Yeah, and I think so it started, this Google Life Sciences started within Google X, and it's headed by Andrew Conrad. So he actually is one of the founders for LabCorp. And so he has a kind of a pharmaceutical and biotech background. And a lot of the projects within this Google Life Sciences are kind of fit along those lines of what are these, what do we kind of foresee the future? And, people kind of call them Star Trek type visions, but, the things like the smart contact lens, measuring glucose, these are things that may not, be around in the next couple of years, but it's something that the team really hopes will be around for generations. And the baseline, that was also announced last year, but the baseline study is a big, a really big project as well of, what can we measure? If we can measure everything we can possibly measure about a human in a population of people, can we detect diseases much earlier than we can right now? So it's really just kind of enhancing our level of disease diagnostics and detection, as well as, intervention.
So, what really drove Google's, you touched on a few of those points here, but what really drove Google's interest in Lyft, and how has your life or Lyft's path within Google been impacted positively or negatively as part of being part of Google?
Yeah, I think that, one of the big things, the whole intent was to reach many, many more people. So, and that's really the goal. Like, I think that we're very much still operating, but with a lot more resources and able to develop more and more, products, new technologies. But with the LiftWear device, even with that, being able to get it out to the rest of the world, that's, I think a lot of people, my parents come from India. A lot of people in Google X, a lot of the management comes from third world countries, and part of the mission there too is getting these sorts of devices that can help people fundamentally into those developing countries as well. So I think we want to, it's both growing the business as well as growing the impact that we can have.
I would like Dr.
Okay. So Kadir, Anupam touched a little bit on, developing markets or emerging markets. What are the kinds of things that JJDC is doing on the medical device side in emerging markets?
At this point, not very much,
Okay.
but that doesn't mean the need exists. Because as you think about markets, especially markets that we are not in, it becomes much more attractive to think about an alternate business model or alternate technology to be able to go to the emerging markets. Because one of the main challenges that medical device manufacturers have is, well, I'm pretty good and I'm happy with what I'm doing here in the developed world, and I'm getting a reasonable ASP or on good margins for it. So what is it going to my current market if I introduce a product, something similar in the emerging market? That is a huge, huge worry because then you're trying to kind of disrupt your existing market, and that is what's going to paying your bills. So from a corporate or a J&J point of view, the way I would like to kind of look at that as well, look at markets that you're not in. And that would be, an emerging market would be a prime example or prime geography to be able to disrupt that. Because you may want to introduce the product there, but then won't be able to kind of bring it back, if it's possible regulatory-wise, to be able to do that. And there are a few markets that we are not playing in. That's definitely would be a great way to kind of do that. So that's just one way of kind of looking at emerging markets. The other one is to look at local geographies and see what are the needs for the local geographies and see whether there is anything unique, more different. I'm not here talking about just being able to have a different SKU on your medical device product to look at the size of the catheters or those type of. That is a very small incremental change. I'm talking about any local diseases that we want to look at. And there are a few things that are being done, at least in the orthopedic side. There is a R&D center in Shanghai that is kind of looking at emerging market needs to be able to say what are the products that we need to be developed on this. There is something similar in Singapore, I believe, that's also looking at local areas. But that is a huge, huge area because right now, and for medical device entrepreneurs in the crowd here, it's not a major news that the medical device market is maybe single digits, low single digits, or mid-high single digits growth.
Sure.
It is not the 90s where we got 10-15% was par for the course. So the growth has to come from somewhere else.
Yeah, so it's interesting when you think about the growth. We all know average American is getting fatter and older. You would think that the natural growth is there, and one of the things which at least I believe has been a big issue is, and this is a little bit of a controversial topic, is the role that the government has played in our industry. Be it medical device tax and so forth. Again, I won't even get started how much of an impediment the government has been in this industry. But Anupam, looks like you at least had a case where the government was helpful. So how was the government helpful to you besides just SBIR grants and so forth? Are they willing to pay for the device once you have it on the market?
Yeah, those are all really good points. I think there's two sides to the coin, right?
Sure.
So there's, I've experienced both. But yeah, in terms of how they've helped, it's actually been really amazing from, kind of once you get into the program. Like I kind of mentioned, it was a gift. Like we weren't really expected to pay back any of the money that they gave. All of our IP was still owned by the company. So, in order to pay that back, it was really about delivering on what I promised I was going to do. And also job creation was a huge thing too. And so yeah, one was through the grant. The other was actually commercial assistance because they recognized that coming out of academia and I didn't know anything about business in the beginning. And so they assigned mentorship, people that had gone through and successfully commercialized, done the same thing. They helped, they even paid for...
So are there any specific programs that you can point to where if people here are interested in reaching out to,
definitely.
they should get there?
Yeah, so the SBA is really a great resource and they're doing a lot to help small businesses grow. And the grants, so they do both grants and loans to small businesses. Through this grant program, there was this something called the Commercial Assistance Program, CAP. So that's what we were, and that was offered for free through this program. And then there was also a market assessment program. So they basically did a full market analysis to help us develop a commercialization plan and quick path to market. Yeah. So this is one division of the the NIH and the SBA, and then there's the FDA. So they kind of recognize that it's difficult for small companies to get through. So they also, especially for drug development, they offer additional funding to help kind of fast track your new drug, which we didn't do, but they have those resources as well. And then for our product, the VA, so the VA hospitals are actually buying and reimbursing veterans. Sure. We're working on Medicare right now. So there's definitely a lot of assistance that we've received. And I think the government, the SBA and NIH have been able to kind of show that this is a case study and this is an example of what they can do. So I think that's also helped help their programs as well.
So, Kadir, again, when you look at sort of the overall regulatory cycles for medical devices, we are talking about an implantable device on average taking 150 million plus and around 8 to 10 years to get to market. The traditional venture route has become very tough now. And, even though the dollars have kind of stayed constant over the last 10, 15 years, around 2.5 billion. But if you look at the number of transactions that are happening, I was just looking at some data. The number of transactions that happened in 2001 in medical devices were around 160 transactions in a year. That has reduced down to now 40 or so. So what we are seeing is large rounds and mostly later stage. So how has JJDC stepped up? I know that when I was there, typically getting into a Series A and Series B investment was tough because nobody wanted dumb corporate money. I mean, that was a thing in this valley. I'm sure that has changed a lot. How has that evolved and how much more involved you are in earlier stage?
Well, definitely, yeah. We are getting a lot more deal flow in Series A and Series B, where typically that is kind of restricted to private VCs. They don't come to the strategics at that point. So you are seeing a lot more of that. Very few getting funded, not because they are interesting, but it is just the factors that you mentioned. So I think from a corporate point of view, you got to look at is the unmet clinical need. I think if you're trying to kind of create an idea, if you're an entrepreneur in the crowd, you're trying to create an idea because, well, something got an exit, a huge exit, so I'm going to do something very similar to what that guy did. Major issue. I remember at one point, we are looking at interventional pulmonology companies. There were 8 interventional pulmonology companies all trying to do very similar things. How many do you need? There are probably 3 or 4 acquirers out there, so maybe 3 or 5. So I think when you kind of work on it, you got to really think whether this is the major unmet need. If there are a few other companies working on this space, stay out of it because you're not going to get funding saying that, well, I'm doing what the other guy is doing, so why don't you fund me as well with the same valuation? So I think that is a mistake. So I think as long as you focus on something that is really unmet need, there are so many drug diseases that are resistant to drugs, so you got to kind of focus on your population and segment your population very clearly, rather than saying, here is 1 billion patients, easily there are $1 billion out there. That is a slide that's in everywhere that makes me always smile because you got to be clear about who your target population is.
But I do have one I need to talk to you about. We have little time remaining here, but few questions from the audience. And, again, we were joking about it yesterday. Being a TiE, everything has to be about, in some ways, connected to Internet of Things. And lo and behold, the questions are mostly around wearable market. Any sense of how big that market is? And then second follow-on question on that is, really, do you guys consider Apple Watch a medical device? And what role do you see wearables playing in the healthcare?
Right now the Apple Watch is not a medical device, and they're not making any claims to be. We don't know if that's going to change. But I think, what we think about wearables right now is more on the consumer, kind of Fitbit and these sorts of devices have been out the past few years. But I think there is a huge need for, a different kind of wearable. This is probably more of a medical device. But right now, the problem that even for neurodegenerative diseases, patients really see their doctors only once a year. Mm-hmm. And, it's they're assessed through a subjective measurement, usually done on pencil and paper, and they're kind of rated that way, but there's no idea of what's going on in between. So I think there's a really big need for understanding that, and how it's done, I think, is a real challenge, and we don't really know yet.
I think wearables have a huge potential to add to the medical devices industry, because I think as you think about what I talked about earlier in terms of segmenting your patients and making sure you're showing clinical evidence that it works, I think the wearables would go a long way, because currently we are still thinking about, let's say, I used to grow up in a cardiac rhythm management market where we implant ICDs, and only 1 out of 7 ICDs really fire. These are $20,000 devices that we implant. So how does the payer know that it is actually something that is useful for the entire healthcare system? Possibly the wearables, in whatever mode, will be able to do a lot to be able to show evidence there is economic evidence to be able to kind of implant these devices and someone's to pay for it.
So you think more data in the hands of payers through wearable devices?
No question, it's already, the cat is out of the bag. There is data out there. The question is how to kind of take that and make the data into knowledge. That is the key, and there are people here, maybe some in the crowd here already working on that. So the question is the administration, everyone else in the system has to take care of that and say how to use it for the best use of the patients, ultimately.
Well, thank you very much. We are out of time here, but big applause to the panel. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.